Good evening, everybody. We'll give it just a few more minutes for some additional attendees, and then we'll get started. Thanks. All right, thank you, everybody. Good evening. My name is Jason Widstrom, and I'm happy to present the project that we have here for Transportation Capital Projects, the South 4 Mile Run Drive Complete Streets project. I'll briefly go through the agenda for tonight. The next slide, please. So this evening, we'll be going through a little bit of housekeeping. We'll discuss the project goals, give some background information about how we got to this point. We'll also review the existing conditions out on South 4 Mile Run Drive. We'll provide a proposed concept design, and then we'll talk about next steps and how to share some input, and also provide an opportunity for people to type in and answer some questions. Next slide, please. So on the meeting tonight with me, we have a couple project members that you'll be hearing from. We've got Christine Baker, Dan Neighbors, Parker Toro, and myself. In order to ask questions, if you're not familiar with Teams, there is a box at the top of your screen that looks like a comment icon with a question mark in it. It's adjacent to the leave button. And so when you click that, it should open up a window which allows you to type in a question. Feel free to type questions as we go along. We will keep track of those, and once it gets to the Q&A portion, we'll certainly read those aloud and try and provide an answer at this time. All right. So with that said, let's get into where we are tonight. So here is on the screen here, we have the project schedule, and you can see tonight is our first public meeting. And we're hoping that after tonight, we'll start a public process where we're soliciting feedback. So through the month of July and August, we'll be asking for input on the design that we're presenting tonight. Given the nature of this project, which is solely markings on the ground or striping, this schedule is pretty quick. It's not a lot of design that goes into this because we're not removing any kind of hardscape or concrete curbs or sidewalks or anything like that. So it's fairly easy to design and implement. So we're hoping that once we get the public feedback, we can make some modifications in the month of September, which should correspond with the next big milestone is the completion of the Jane Dean Park curb work, which is adjacent to the project that we're going to implement. And that's expected to be done in September, which would then open up an opportunity for us to come in late September or early October to provide a resurfacing of the road and then some striping on the ground. We are constrained by the weather with striping, so we're hoping to get this in before cold weather sets in. So potentially in October, if things need a little extra time. We do have some history of getting markings down in November, so we'll see how it goes. Next slide, please. So the project you're going to hear about tonight, we're really focusing on safety as one of our primary goals with what we're trying to do with South 4 Mile Run Drive. And so the bullets you see here on the screen, most of them are directly related to safety. So obviously, Jenny Dean Park is going to generate additional trips in the walking and biking through this area as more and more vehicles. And so we recognize that South 4 Mile Run Drive needs to provide an opportunity for those individuals to do that a bit safer than today. We also realize that there's some speeds that are in excess of what's posted, and so we're hoping to reduce those, as well as provide accessibility to the nearby bus stop and some other more, I guess, ancillary things that we're trying to achieve here beyond safety is to maximize the parking that's out there. Because of Jenny Dean Park, we realize that there's a need for additional parking. And this is also the first steps in what we hope to be a phased improvement along the whole 4 Mile Run Drive area as it was described in the 4 Mile Run Valley Area Plan. Next slide, please. So the project we're discussing tonight runs from South 4 Mile Run Drive, from South Nelson Street to Shirlington Road. The broader area that I mentioned just a moment ago that was identified in the area plan is a larger project that would run from South Walter Reed Drive all the way to Shirlington. And so what we're presenting tonight is, like I said, the first step in what we hope to be a larger project for the entire corridor. Next slide, please. So how did we get here? As I mentioned, this section, well, the entire section actually of South 4 Mile Run Drive was mentioned in that area plan. Next slide, please. And in that plan, there was an assessment that was done that determined that there was excess capacity in the lanes here and a need to enhance the safety for people who bike and walk around this area. Next slide, please. The plan went as far as kind of prescribing what it could be. And so this slide here is taken directly from that plan, showing a concept of the area from Walter Reed to Shirlington. And the area we're going to get a little bit more detail on tonight is shown here in dashed lines. I also put the link if anybody here is interested in looking at the area plan. You can see this link below, and once we're complete tonight, this PowerPoint will be posted on the project website, and so you can come back and review the PowerPoint, get this slide. All right, next slide, please. Additionally, the area plan also was a little bit prescriptive on the parking that I mentioned from the goals earlier, and that it would be a head out angled parking due to the safety. It's much safer than the alternative, which would be head in. And so we're trying to use this as kind of the support in how we've described what the project will be tonight. Next slide, please. So the area plan was done in 2018 and adopted by the county. And in a more recent action, the county adopted a Vision Zero action plan, and that was done earlier this spring. On page 34 of the plan, you can see a map, which I've kind of brought onto this slide, and I apologize, it's a little bit tough to read, but this corridor was identified as a high injury network, as part of the high injury network. And that runs all the way from Columbia Pike to Shirlington. And so what that means is that we've identified this section of road as to have a higher density of crashes that have resulted in serious injury or fatal injury. Next slide, please. So here we're showing the crash data from 2018 to 2020. And this is from Walter Reed to Shirlington. And you can see here that there have been some significant injuries along this area in just a short period of time. Next slide, please. So the existing conditions today in the project area, as you can see here, is on the left side of the screen, is we have a 4-lane road with parking on both sides. There's a disjointed sidewalk on the south side of the road, although in the left picture you can just see a little bit of it, but as it goes further down, the sidewalk disappears. Some of that will be resolved by Jenny Dean Park. There are commercial vehicles that line the area, as you can see here in the photo on the right. There's also a bus stop location that is visible in the right picture. There's a flag near the yellow sign. Next slide, please. It's much of the same conditions with the 4-lane roads, with the missing sidewalk on the south side, no sidewalk on the north side, and also the block length is approximately 800 feet, and there is no crossing between the intersection with Nelson and Shirlington Road. And you can see here, people who use the parking on one side typically just walk right across the middle of the road. All right, next slide, please. So this street in the area of Walter Reed is Shirlington has a average daily traffic of about 16,000 vehicles. As more recently, it was counted in 2018, and it was a bit less than what VDOT had provided at 13.5. Below that, you can see here that the peak hour would be 612 vehicles traveling westbound. And the speed data that we've collected here shows that the speed limit of 35 is exceeded with the, well, it's a little bit difficult to understand here, but the 85th percentile is kind of the metric that we use to determine if they're speeding. And so that it has been measured at 40.9, which is above the speed limit, which is a concern for this area. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we are with the conceptual plan for the marking in the area that I've kind of spoken about. To give you a kind of lay of the land, we've got Shirlington Road to the right of the screen here, where the cursor is. And so that is the east side of the plan. And then to the left side of the screen where you see a blue line, there'll be a continuation slide here showing the other side of this project. But so what we've shown here in this marking plan is a reduction from the 4 lanes that are out there on 4 Mile Run Drive today down to 2. As you recall, I mentioned earlier ago that this was something that was identified in the area plan as a possibility given the volumes of traffic that we see out there today. Given that the peak hour is 600 some odd vehicles, the capacity of a single lane by engineering standards is 700. So we're below that threshold, which should enable us to reduce these down to 2 lanes. You'll also notice we're reducing the crossing distance at Shirlington And actually, this was already completed through a refreshing of the striping that's out there today. So what we've done is we've extended the curb out using markings on the ground. And this should allow pedestrians trying to cross at this intersection to be a bit closer to the other side while still being protected. And so vehicles should not be using that space. This plan also provides a new median, which is shown in yellow. And this also acts as part of a turning lane for vehicles going eastbound. We also are providing a new pedestrian walkway on the north side of the street. And this would be adjacent to the curb. So basically you'd have the travel way going westbound, then you would have a parking lane, and then you would have a walkway for pedestrians who park on that side of the road. And you'll see here, as I mentioned earlier, in the area plan, we've accommodated additional parking in the area by providing angled head out only parking on the south side of the road. And this allows us to increase the number of spots on the south side of the road from 25 to 45. Next slide, please. And this is a continuation of the other slide that I showed here with the blue line. So this is further to the west. In this graphic, you can see Nelson Street and the crossing here at 4 Mile Run Drive. And similarly, we're reducing the lanes down to 2, reducing the crossing distance by providing the striped out curb extension. And you can see, again, the median here in the turn lane, allowing for traffic to turn onto Nelson. The walkway is continued and it connects with the new crossing. I'm sorry, the shortened crossing at Nelson, as well as the angled parking. It's a continuation. And not to be confused, so there are no changes on the north side of the road in terms of the number of parking, and that the overall increase is 45. So between this slide and the other slide, the total of increased spots is 20. It's not 20 on each slide. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, this project does have a pretty quick timeline associated with it because marking is something that the county can do rather quickly and effectively in terms of design and implementation. And we wanted to come to the public with something a little bit more detailed than the initial concept plan that was provided in the 4 Mile Run area plan. And so the 2 slides I just went through were more or less kind of what our best thoughts were on how to implement the 4 Mile Run area plan in the context of safety and the Vision Zero plan. And so that is our best effort, I would say, at this point. But we want to get some input from the public on that plan, as well as provide some ideas for areas where we have flexibility in the design. So the point of this slide is to talk about opportunities for change in the plan that could be incorporated or might not. So we're searching for your input. So I'll go through these with a little bit of detail so you get a bit more understanding of maybe why we didn't include these. So the mid-block crossing, as I mentioned earlier, there's an 800-foot block length here, which is a pretty long block length. But we did not include a mid-block crosswalk, mainly because when we looked at the trips, like where would people be going to and from, and would they be using it? It didn't seem like there was going to be a lot of volume in this location. We did take a look at the bus stop and the volume that we typically see of people getting on and off there, and then where they head. And it showed that the people who ride the bus typically head north across the trail so up the hill, that they're not really going to Jenny Dean Park. Or the area of Jenny Dean Park. Now, this could change in the future. We might see additional trips using the bus, but we're not really 100% on where that is, and this might be something that we would monitor in the future. Doesn't mean that we couldn't accommodate it at this point, but our thoughts were that at this point it didn't need to be there, but it's an opportunity. I mentioned, the existing conditions today does not have a pedestrian walkway on the north side. So this is something that was added that we thought was an improvement, but if this was something that was the public was not interested in, that we could remove that. As I mentioned, the bus stop location near the intersection with Shirlington is something that could be relocated or shifted further down or back, most likely further down. In order to do that, there would have to be some modifications to the area, and this would be something that we could show. At this time, we could do the markings and come back and move the stop. The reason that's not so simple is that the area would have to then become compliant with current ADA regulations. And so we would have to pour a new slab or do a floating bus stop at that location. So there would have to be some concrete work that would be done, some coordination with other agencies on how to do that, as well as looking at the easement requirements. And so it is a possibility, but there's a lot more involved in that, and that's unlikely to follow the schedule that we had earlier, but it's something that we could definitely look into if the community was interested in relocating that stop. I know in some previous communications with the public on the coming plan that there was concerns about the volume of traffic on 4 Mile Run Drive and the need for additional lanes, or more than one, especially near the intersection. And so there is flexibility in the length of the striped median that we have. We could make some of those turn pockets a bit longer if that's a need, but we do have them sized today based on the vehicle counts that we have on record for how many turn during peak hours. But that is something that is certainly flexible, so please take a look at that. And then the last area that we really felt that had some flexibility in it is the duration of parking that's going to be out there once Jenny Dean Park is closed, and what hours those restrictions might be. And so whether the community would like to see a bit more turnover, so shorter times for the parking, or a bit longer, or limited in the evenings, or sorry, during the day, and allowing for vehicles in the evenings. So it's certainly something up for discussion, and we would like your input on those. Next slide, please. All right, so we did create a Survey Monkey that is going to be open for public comment for the next month. It has all of the items that I've kind of discussed here tonight. It talks about the goals. It has some of the background, as well as an opportunity to provide some feedback on the potential flexibility items, as well as to rank some of the items that were listed there. So I do encourage you to take a look at our project website and forward that on to anybody who might be interested. We'll also post the link to the survey in the chat this evening. So if you're interested in doing it right now, you should be able to see a link and go ahead over to that. All right, next slide, please. So with that, we're going to open up the Q&A portion of the meeting tonight. I have Dan Neighbors with me, who's going to work through the questions. And so I will now turn it over to Dan to ask the first question that came in the chat.
Okay, thanks, Jason. I don't know if these are in any particular order, but I see a question about where do bikes ride? Are there bike lanes, PBL? So I'll start by answering that. In this iteration of this design, we were not able to accommodate exclusive bike lanes here because we were looking at the connectivity. Obviously, this is just a long block that we're proposing this project, so there wouldn't be connectivity beyond that. And the other thing too is we recognize that there was a need for people that are on the north side of the street parking to have a way to access a crosswalk. Same goes for people that are using the transit stop. So in future iterations, like when we look at this as a more complete corridor, there's other things that we can look at, but we weren't able to accommodate that for right now. And I will note that the trail, the 4 Mile Run Trail, is just to the north of this. And you'll see right on the screen, off to the right side, we recently made some improvements to the intersection with Shirlington Road. And that includes, we installed a southbound no right on red to help, alleviate vehicles being in the crosswalk when bikes or pedestrians are using it. And then we did a LPI, a lead pedestrian interval, on both the north and south leg of the intersection with Shirlington Road right off to the right of the screen. And you will see there's one feature there where we did this kind of curb extension to really shorten that crossing for people that are biking or walking that are trying to cross 4 Mile Run. And the next question, I'll see, are changes being scored for climate impact? Jason, can you answer that question?
I'm not aware of how the county does that, but that is something I can look into and get back to the public.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. The next question that I can see is, how wide are the clear zones on both sides? And I'm not sure what that question is asking. In the engineering world, a clear zone is basically on your high-speed roadways, you need an area that is free and clear of obstruction so that if somebody runs off the road, they're not hitting an obstruction. So I'm not sure what that's specifically talking about because it's not the same type of roadway. We obviously have parking on both sides here. So there's not a clear zone from the engineering standpoint. So if you want to, whoever put that in, if you want to re-ask that in a different way, we'll try to get back to that. I'm sorry if we're not able to answer that, unless somebody else can. Can you, Jason?
I don't know, but we could point out, and this is a good slide to show it, that the dimensions of what we're proposing out there in the road is shown here on the plan in the middle. You can see some measurements in what the cross section of the road is. And I mentioned this, I think, only once, but I just want to make it clear is that we're not proposing to change any of the concrete gutter lines that are out there today, other than where Jenny Dean is going to set the curb as part of their project, which this has been coordinated with. And so we're not looking to do any real concrete work, any adjustments. So this is simply from the face of one curb to the other curb. You can see the dimensions here of, I believe it's 15 feet or 16 feet for the angled parking, 11 feet for the lane. You would then have another 11 feet for the median. You would have 11 feet for the next travelway going north. The parking lane is 7 feet wide, and then the pedestrian walkway would be 4 feet wide.
Okay, thank you, Jason. So there's one clarification on the ask about the clear zones is they want to know the clear zone of the sidewalks as part of the park project. Do you know that information, Jason?
So I guess the width of the sidewalk would be
probably the width minus the area where there's parking meters or trees, those sorts of things, parking signs?
I believe it's 5 feet in this area, but I would have to confirm that.
Okay. Questions that we're not able to answer right now, we will post something that answers some of those questions, but that is part of the Jenny Dean Park plan in terms of what the clear zone on the sidewalk will be, but we'll find that out and get clarification on that. Let's see, what else? When were the traffic counts conducted? When will you post that information? Jason, do you know when the traffic counts were conducted?
Actually, I'll turn that one to Christine. Maybe she knows. The tightest time frame I had was 2018, which was provided by TE. So I'm not sure if Christine, you have more detail.
I'm sorry, I don't know when exactly the traffic counts were conducted, but I can say that anytime we do collect traffic counts, it's on a weekday, any Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. It is not on a week with a holiday, and it is not on a week in the summertime. We only collect data at times where there are typical travel conditions. So we can look back and confirm the exact dates. There's usually multiple dates of data collection, but I can confirm that it would be on a typical type of travel day.
And I will affirm that it was pre-pandemic, the traffic counts.
Yeah, if it was 2018, it's definitely beforehand.
Okay. I'm looking at some other question. What is the projected growth of Shirlington Village? Will it impact traffic volume or flow? Jason, can you take that one?
I think that's a good question that we don't have specific numbers on right now. This is something that we could do some research and look into. I think the idea here is, would additional volume be coming onto this road, and that we would all of a sudden need 4 lanes again. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we have a peak hour of roughly 600, a little over 600. It's allowable up to 700, which would be a significant increase as a percentage base. So I don't necessarily know that is a concern at this point, but certainly our goal with this project is to implement what we believe we can do with the data that we have now, that we can accommodate. And then we're hoping to monitor how that project goes. Because it's marking, it's something that is a bit more flexible in terms of how we implement or making changes versus going ahead and putting down concrete curbs and really reinforcing all of this space.
Yeah, and Jason, I can add to that in terms of some of the other projects where we've reduced from 4 to 2 lanes. We did that on Potomac Avenue last year. We did it on Wilson Boulevard last year to the west of Manchester. We're planning on doing one on Wilson this year. That's basically between Frederick and George Mason. And all those roadways have over 700 vehicles in the peak hour. So this is well below what we've done on some of our other streets. So from a traffic operations standpoint, we know that this is likely in the safe zone of where it will function adequately. I will add I'll answer one of the other questions while I'm at it. Do 4 lanes, I'm sorry, that every time something gets posted, it moves the question. So Do 4 lanes continue from Nelson Street to the west? At this point, they do not, because these changes were centered around making access to the park, improved in conjunction with the improvements at the park. But we do recognize that the 4-lane section probably does contribute to those higher speeds, which we really want to mitigate. So that for now, this is what we're able to do. I think Jason said it well too. This is something that we try to do and take an opportunity to do something relatively inexpensively when we can. And I will say, moving forward, we'll look at the rest of the corridor between Walter Reed and Nelson to see what can be done in subsequent years that help make this kind of a more complete street and really fits in with that initiative of Vision Zero of improving conditions on our high energy network. Okay. What is the timeline for the review assessment of the restriping project? Jason, I think you answered that, right? Do you want to chime in?
Sure. Yeah, so early on the schedule slide, our hope is that once we get the feedback and we can finalize a design, that we would do the installation in late September, early October. We would assess this most likely. We would, like to have this in place for approximately a year, and then reassess how things are going before we would move on to the additional phases of what was outlined in the area plan. On the slide that I had mentioned earlier about the longer range kind of staged approach to the improvements. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Jason. I see another question here. Will there be changes to the ped bike markings at 4 Mile Run in Shirlington to make it easier and safer for those traveling between the WNOD and 4 Mile Run trail further south? So I did attempt to answer that earlier, and maybe we can go back to the slide that shows the intersection of Shirlington and 4 Mile Run. And nope, next one. That one right there. So this is the intersection. Sorry that it's not completely shown here, but the intersection is just on the right side of the screen where you see that pedestrian crosswalk. So what we've done there is to the very kind of top portion, which is north on the map or on the diagram, that top portion we constructed, or we marked out a area where vehicles can't go. We put in bollards, so that's kind of like a temporary bump out to shorten that crossing distance for people that are either biking or walking across that western leg of the intersection. And then if you're going southbound on Shirlington, and you're turning right to go on 4 Mile Run, we put a no right on red. So that helps mitigate the conflicts with people that are crossing with vehicles who are trying to make that right, obviously on a red. It prohibits that, so there's less conflicts. And then we did a lead pedestrian interval, which basically means when a pedestrian phase is illuminated on the signal, then pedestrians get about a 3 to 5 second head start before any traffic moves, before there's any conflicts. So those are the things that we've done to help enhance safety. I will say that there's a no right on red on the other legs that we've implemented before. So that's what we've done for now. Again, this is those types of things we monitor over time and see if the improvements are helping make a difference. Will the parking spots have backstops to prevent cars from backing into the sidewalk? That's a good question. We do that in locations where we don't have enough space. And that's something that we'll have in this location, because again, we have to really see more details in terms of what the dimensions are. So we'll take a look at that so that there isn't that overhang that constricts the space that people walk. So that's a good question. So 4 lanes do continue past Nelson, correct? That is correct. This project goes between Shirlington Road and Nelson, where there will be 2 lanes. To the west of Nelson, the existing 4 lanes will still be there after this project is done. Next question. What about trees or shade to be added? And that, I think, touches on the park plan, which is, again, outside of this scope. This is really just what are we doing curb to curb, but I'll turn it over to Jason to see if he is specifically familiar with what the park is doing there.
Thanks, Dan. So on the screen, you can see here just the edge of the park's plan where there are tree pits. Those are the circles that you can see on the plan. Those indicate trees. And so along the frontage of Jenny Dean, yes, there will be trees added. To the north side of the street, there will not be trees added. And I don't believe there's a real opportunity to do so, mainly because right above them is the power wires that Dominion runs through the corridor. And I know they do not allow trees underneath those. So hopefully that answers the question.
All right. Thank you, Jason. And I'm going to turn it over to Christine for a moment. I think she has some information about one of the questions that was asked earlier about some of the long-range growth in Shirlington. Christine.
Sure. I just took a quick look back into our planning department socioeconomic forecasts, which we provide to the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments when we develop regional growth forecasts. And those numbers appear to show over the next 2 decades about 100 new jobs potentially in that area and no real big changes in population growth. So we can confirm the actual numbers and post them with the responses. But we do see a little bit of growth in terms of commercial, retail, that type of employment growth, but maybe not too much on the population side. So very small growth anticipated in that area. And that kind of ties back to your response, Dan, that there's plenty of room to accommodate the traffic flow.
Okay, great. Thanks, Christine. I don't think there are any new questions, so we'll just do a call out to see if anybody else has other questions that they want to add to the chat. Give it a minute or two. Okay, not seeing any new questions. So Jason, do you want to wrap this up?
Yes, if you want to head to the last slide. Oh, we just got a new question, actually.
Okay, what is the date of long-range growth projections?
I assume the date of the study, Christine?
So the long-range projections are updated every couple years. I was looking at the round 9.1 forecast, and that looks at forecasts every 5 years. So I was comparing the 2020 numbers with the 2045 numbers. And it spans several different, or every 5-year period. So we can confirm the numbers with the latest round forecast and provide them with responses, because I don't have the round 2.9 or 9.21s. But they should be pretty similar. So we'll publish those along with the meeting notes.
Christine, I think the question is more, when were those numbers produced? Were they?
Oh, so those would have been produced in the last couple of years.
Okay.
Yeah, and the 9.2 will provide slightly updated one. So we'll double check it with the newest round. But yes, it's recent information.
Okay. All right.
Jason?
So, yep.
Sorry, there's one follow-up question on this same topic for Christine. And that is, when was the report generated?
I believe that report was generated in 2019. And then I think the 9.2 forecasts have just come out. So that would have been produced in 2020, 2021. And we will get those latest numbers and make sure they're consistent with the 9.1.
Thank you. All right, Jason, back to you.
All right. Yes, so if we want to head to the last slide. So as I mentioned earlier, we are opening up the public comment phase for the next month, and you know, I encourage everyone to take the questionnaire on SurveyMonkey, as well as to share that with others who might be interested in taking it. If you have any other detailed questions that might help your decision making in that questionnaire, certainly feel free to reach out to me. I have my email address on the screen here. This PowerPoint, as I mentioned earlier, will be posted on the website. So you'll have an opportunity to go ahead and download this and look back at any of the things we've talked about, as well as grab my email address. So with that, I think we can give everybody back about 10 minutes on the schedule. All right. So thank you, everybody, for participating, and I look forward to seeing the comments come in. Thank you.